there's a luggage check also, but you want to take it, they can lock it up for you if you like.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to.
Oh, you're going to
Trying
take
get a
off
flight,
right
so
after. Okay. What's this?
That's for your group sent me, so you can hand that out.
Oh, okay.
Don't turn it upside down.
Oh, sorry.
It won't work too well to do that.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize there was an up and down. Oh, up. You're right. Sorry. My fault.
There you go.
All right.
That's neat. You have the memory stick, or?
My pocket.
Thank you.
So I brought cupcakes for everybody. And the one that's tipped over is my fault.
Oh, okay. Oh, look at that. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you too. I never thought to say don't turn it over. Yeah, it did. That's it. I know, me too. Okay, sorry.
No problem.
We can't leave these sitting here by me.
Wait for Joy to
What is
sit
this?
and
Joy brought
situated.
cupcakes for everybody. Oh, well, we'll do that later, huh?
All right, wait for the next panel. This panel is called Getting to Mars. And we have a really impressive lineup of panelists here. We're going to talk about all the different aspects that will be required for getting us to Mars, from launch to propulsion, to human factors and preparation of the spacecraft as well. Just going to be a great panel. And moderating this panel is Sandy Coleman. Sandy's the director of NASA exploration programs at ATK. She joined ATK in 2006 and just did an amazing amount of work there. She's a 40-year veteran of NASA. And when she was at NASA, she was manager of the Space Shuttle external tank project after the Columbia accident, responsible for the overall management and redesign, development, production, test, and integration of the external tank. She also has had other positions, such as a transition manager for Marshall Space Flight Center. She began her career in the Saturn V office. After 1969 moon landing, she became a charter member of the Space Shuttle Task Team, worked in 3 of the 4 main project offices. She also presently serves as the chair of the board of Women in Aerospace, one of our nonprofit sponsors here today. And she has won numerous awards, including the Astronaut Silver Snoopy. What is the Astronaut Silver Snoopy? Well, the NASA Outstanding Leadership Medal and the NASA Exceptional Achievement Award. Ladies and gentlemen, Sandy Coleman.
Thanks so much. Well, I thought, first of all, thank you, and it's so wonderful to be in the audience with Kathy Coleman. We corresponded a lot during return to flight. She would accidentally get my emails and then relay all of the detailed engineering work that we were doing in the tank to the astronaut crew. And she always said that she told them that we were really getting into, she was feeling very comfortable with all the work we were doing.
I have to interrupt for a minute. First to say that the Silver Snoopy Award that they're talking about is an incredibly special award. It's not something that you get that you're next in line, or there's very few of them that are given out, and it's really not, I think most people at NASA go like the extra mile, and at least really many of them do, but this is about going the extra marathon. And I didn't have anything to do with Sandy getting this particular one, but it's called the Astronauts Award. It comes specifically from our office. We look at all the write-ups, not every one of us, but it's an incredibly special award. And the other thing is that I would get these emails about return to flight, and people on her team asking really candid and frank questions that told me, reading these emails, that this team was a really open communication team, and it made me feel really
man, those were good days. They were tough days, but we did have a great team. You know, I thought at first I would just talk a little bit, since everyone has talked about how they got where they got, I thought I would talk a little bit about my career and why I was at NASA, how I got there. My Girl Scout troop visited Von Braun, Dr. Werner von Braun, when he was still part of the Army at Redstone Arsenal, before NASA at Marshall was even formed in 1960. My dad was at Redstone Arsenal in intelligence and security, and so he arranged for my Girl Scout troop to go in to meet Dr. Werner von Braun. And this man was so big, and he was, you know, he took the time to tell these little girls that we're going to go to the moon. And I was just enthralled with him. And then I had the opportunity to work for him as a secretary in the instrument unit office, in the Saturn instrument unit office, which was just the thrill of my life. Unbelievable that I was part of that team, you know, that they accepted me into that team. And then I did go on to be as one of the original 40 members of the Space Shuttle Task Team. To tell you a little bit about what I did with that Girl Scout after meeting him is I was in the accelerated math class in high school and was the only girl, you know, and there was a woman teacher, and she wasn't necessarily enthralled about having another girl that she thought would not do anything with that. But still, you know, I was there and I did well. I was, you know, had top scores there. And then when I started at college, everybody said, you're good in math. Well, you know, you should go into accounting, which I did. I got an accounting degree. Nobody really told me at that time that I could be an engineer, which is what I try to do today, is tell little girls, if they're good in math and science, is you can be an engineer. You can do anything you want to do. But when I got to the top of that accounting degree at NASA, I had a lot of really wonderful male mentors. They were all male at that time, who told me that I should go get an engineering degree, and they helped me. I did the prerequisites, and then I was the first woman at Marshall that got selected to do full-time graduate study and got the master's degree in engineering. And from there, I'm telling you, NASA is, there's no way that I can tell you the opportunities that I was given. I was promoted from a 12 to a 13 to a GS-14 to a GS-15, and in 3 years, basically, every time I would get qualified, somebody in another office would offer me a promotion, and I would get it in my existing organization. But I worked hard. You know, it didn't come easy, and I was competing with a lot of men, but I always felt like that I was given a fair shake. I didn't get every job after that before that I thought I deserved. But then every male doesn't get every job that they believe that they deserve. So what we have to do is encourage our girls to work really hard. I mean, this is hard stuff. This is really hard stuff. And you've got to be prepared. I was later selected to be the external tank project manager, not because I was a woman, because they decided that I was the skill that they needed. There was a broken team, you know, that maybe needed my kind of management. I don't really know. I mean, I didn't ask for that job. It was one of those that I said, oh my goodness me, I'm solid. You know, I'd worked in solids my whole career. And now they're asking me to be the external tank project manager. I didn't know anything about foam, but there were a lot of experts in foam. So I tell you all of that to say you really have to work hard. You can't depend on somebody else to do the work for you. You've got to dig it out yourself. You've got to be the best at what you are. And just another point, during return to flight, there were 3 critical jobs during that time that were filled by women. Eileen Collins was the commander of STS-114. The KSE processing manager was a woman. And then the external tank project manager was a woman. So if you think about, that's incredible that NASA would have selected 3 women, or that three women would have elevated to that position in such a critical time. And nobody was thinking about, well, gee, that's a woman, let's give her an opportunity. I can assure you that NASA, the only thing on their mind was getting back to flight. It was not trying to promote a woman or do any of those things. So I guess as I look back at my career, I think here I'm a little girl from Arab, Alabama, and I was the first woman to sit in the firing room to go for launch for one of the project offices. What are the chances of that? You know, you've got every chance to go do anything you want to do if you just put the effort into it. I didn't mean to get into that, but anyway, that was all an ad lib for today. So this panel and this wonderful, all of these wonderful panelists, and I would like for you to give your story as well, if you can do that. I think that would be well, since that's sort of the way the session has gone today. But we're going to talk about getting to Mars. So why is getting to Mars so difficult? You know, we landed on the moon in the 60s, and we've proved that was possible. And here we are, 40 years later, and our rockets are more powerful, they're far more efficient, and far more reliable for sure, but we still have not made that leap to put humans on Mars. Almost every aspect of human spaceflight has evolved, so why haven't we gone to Mars? The answer comes down to basically to time scale. Mars is about 150 times further away from Earth than the moon is, approximately 300 million miles from Earth. That means more fuel, and more fuel means more weight, and more weight means bigger rockets and bigger capsules. Other time scale problems include water and food, which of course, again, add weight. So whether you take it along with you or whether you grow it on the way, you've got to deal with the weight. Clothes and medical supplies and scientific instruments also add weight. And then you've got to deal with the oxygen, and you've got to be protected from harmful radiation and protection from micrometeorites, and on with spacecraft, with your spacesuits, and all of the aspects that go with that. I'll put on my glasses. Then the psychological consequences of being weightless for long periods of time. The health issues for astronauts, for their muscles and their bones and their heart. So all of these issues have to be addressed in the capsule design and the rocket design. Currently, the timescale answer of how long does it take to get to Mars is 214 days. I mean, think about it, 214 days, 7 months. And then after you get there, you have to spend some time at Mars, because if you return immediately to where you left, Earth is just not going to be there. You'll need to wait until Mars and Earth are correctly aligned again before returning, and that's some 3 to 4 months. So you're basically looking at a year and a half that you've got to have food and water and all of the aspects of that. And scientists are constantly exploring ways to travel between planets in a more efficient way. So there's ongoing research in nuclear-powered rockets and plasma-driven rockets. And so someday, maybe, it will be possible to get to Mars in just a few months. But we're not there today. The technology is just not there. So today, we are going to, we've got an excellent slate of panelists to discuss getting to Mars. And so we're going to get into their presentation. So I'm going to give a short bio of each of the ladies, and then I'm going to let them talk a little bit about how they got here. We had not actually talked about this before, but I think it would be interesting, since that's been the day's speeches. How did you get where you are today? How did you start out, and why are you here? Ginger Barnes, my wonderful friend, is president and CEO of USA, United Space Alliance, and she's ultimately responsible for direction, development, and operation of the company. She graduated with high honors from the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and then also for a master's from Vanderbilt University, a commercial pilot, which is just very interesting. I did not know that about you. Instructor, and serves as FAA designer examiner for hot air balloons. Oh, isn't that something cool? So Ginger is going to talk about getting to Mars starts on the ground. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce everyone, and then we'll start back with Ginger. Jeannie Becker is president and director of the recently established Center for Advancement of Science in Space, and her career has been dedicated to advancing research in space-based objectives. She was the chief science officer for Astrogenetic, She's a member of the National Advisory Committee for Women's Health Research Coalition and presently serves as chair. And she's going to be discussing research and development aboard the International Space Station. Joy Bryant from Boeing is Vice President and Program Manager of the International Space Station, and she leads that Boeing team in its integrating role for NASA ISS program. She has worked on also on the Delta launch operations at Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg Air Force Base. Began her career with McDonnell Douglas on the Delta II program. Holds a master's degree in business administration from FIT and MS from Florida Institute of Technology, and a BS in electrical engineering from Auburn University, War Eagle. And Karen Sniderwerk is presently legal counsel at Space Exploration Technology. She's held this position since January of 2011. Prior to that, Karen was deputy to the Associate Administrator for Ledge Affairs at OMB, and also Deputy Chief of Staff and Policy Director in the U.S. House of Representatives in the office of Gabrielle Giffords. A member of the Ways and Means Council at the U.S. House of Representatives. Received her law degree from Texas School of Law. And she is going to be talking about the Dragon-derived Mars lander for scientific and human precursor investigations. Linda Karanian and I have worked closely together since during my 5 years in D.C. working for ATK. She recently retired from Lockheed Martin and joined Strategic Space Solutions. From 2004 to 11, she served as Director of Space Exploration and Space Operations Program in Lockheed Martin's Washington Operations Office. It was a pleasure working with Linda and still is. She received her BS degree in Mathematics and Mechanical Engineering from the University of Texas at Arlington. And then we've got Dr. Sarah Lynn Mark is an endocrinologist. Actually, I did that, and now it's not coming out right. And women's health specialist, and was the first senior medical officer to the Office on Women's Health within the Department of Health and Human Services at NASA. Her bio is most impressive. She's now president of SolarMed Solutions. She's the author of Stellar Medicine, A Journey Through the Universe of Women's Health, a diplomat of the National Board of Medical Examiners. Goodness, goes on and on. She's published and delivered over 500 lectures in the U.S. Goodness. So Dr. Mark is going to end our session on sex and space. So this is going to be really interesting. The new frontier. Okay, so Ginger.
Whatever you want to. That's fine. If this is okay, I'll just sit from here. Thank you, Sandy. I tell you, I am pretty humbled to be up here with these panelists, and it's an honor to be seated here, so I'm glad I get to go first and don't have to follow any one of you. I learned something just now, that Sandy and I have known each other for about 18 months, and we have 3 big things in common. We both hail from the great state of Alabama. Roll Tide. I'm sorry. It's my turn.
My daughter's an Auburn grad, so.
I have a niece that went to Auburn. I still love her. The other thing is, I graduated in accounting, and I graduated in accounting after using all of my math and science as electives because I thought engineers drove trains. So it's just a happy accident that I'm here. You asked how I got here. And then I forgot what the third thing was, but NASA. Oh, no, I remember what the third thing was. You said you find yourself pinching yourself sometimes saying, I'm from Arab, Alabama. I can't tell you how many times I've been in different jobs and different positions in different parts of the world and pinched myself and said, I'm just a little girl from Decatur, Alabama. What am I doing here? Right. So it's a very humbling experience. But at the same time, I know that, like Sandy, it required a lot of hard work, a lot of risk-taking, and a lot of mentors that were mentioned in the last session. So I started out at the Boeing Company. I worked at Boeing for 29 years. I worked in both finance, business management, program, and technical fields. And then about 18 months ago, I had the honor of coming on board the United Space Alliance as its president and CEO. So it has just been a heck of a ride, and I wouldn't take anything for a day of it. So That's the abbreviated version. There's a much longer version that I'll share if we have plenty of time. So today I was asked to talk about design for operations. Our space industry is changing quite a bit. We're going from a staid and true space shuttle program that was very robust for 30 years, and United Space Alliance developed a lot of the operational capabilities and really turned them into world-class practices over its 16-year history. So like many other industries and like many other companies, we learn lessons over and over again. And one of the lessons we learn over and over again is that it's important to think about how you're going to use it and how you're going to operate it when it's on the drawing board. Many times we don't do that. And I'll just talk about one example of how we are thinking about facilitating for other than shuttle operations for the next human spaceflight operations, and also that would facilitate going to Mars. Okay, next page, please. This is just a sampling of capabilities that USA has honed over the 16-year history of operating the space shuttle, and I'll tell you right now that we have taken those and we are applying those to other industries, other applications within our industry, and there are some nice fits. So we're trying to preserve critical skills so that they're around when the next humans want to fly on board a US-made vehicle. Next one. One example of design for operability has to do, would also apply to going to Mars, and that is the ground operations. The ground operations aren't as sexy as some of the things that we do when we talk about human spaceflight, but they're very critical. You have to think about that up front. So today, even though the space shuttle program has retired, and that was the lion's share of USA's work, we are working to enhance the capabilities at Kennedy Space Center to help prepare for the next set of space vehicles. Our industry has gone from the single shuttle, which launched and assembled the station, to many more and more varied launch vehicles. So one of the things that we're advocating is an approach to more efficiently use the infrastructure so that we can share costs and become more competitive in other areas. So we're doing that at Kennedy. And the picture there shows the shuttle on one of the pads, and it shows the Ares 1X, where we've already begun to think about how we can take the lessons learned from our legacy ground systems and use them on the next and then the next generation rockets. So the next page, please. We have a concept of a scalable and expandable infrastructure, including the pads, the vehicle assembly building, the crawler, all of the things that we've learned a lot from on our legacy space programs, and how we can use those to support many other programs, both government and commercial programs. It makes a lot of sense when you think about the savings for sharing the infrastructure. It's more efficient use if we can be flexible and use, rather than having one rigid, dedicated structure for a space shuttle program, you have one that's very flexible and can accommodate all of the users. So minimizes complexity and allows us to accommodate many users. So the next page, please. A couple pages of things that we have done already. We've developed a universal launch, mobile launch platform from lessons learned on Apollo on the shuttle program, and this can either be done as a brand new piece, or it can be the existing mobile launch platforms be modified. So that and the vehicle assembly building, which is already pretty well modular, making it able to accommodate all of the vehicles and do that simultaneously. The other good thing about thinking about doing a universal launch complex has to do with it can be started now. If we're going to accommodate all of the users, we don't have to wait for the design of any one specific one. The next page, the launch pads, we've been working to make sure that we can do multiple propellant use, that we can accommodate either a liquid or solid booster for the Space Launch System, and then working to make sure that we can take care of the data from all of the various vehicles. There's still some problems yet to be solved, and these are some things that we think are pretty important. And that's how do we protect the user's data? How do we make sure that we protect the integrity of their proprietary information? How do we share the resources among all of the users? How do you cost for it? There might be some interesting processes, management tools, some contracting methods that might be employed to help make this a lot more attractive and a lot more efficient. And then finally, how do we use all of the common control systems? So final chart, this is just a single concept for something that we think would be very important for ground operations to design now so that the operations would be smooth, efficient, and be very flexible and a lot more affordable in the future. Thanks.
Okay, Jeannie?
Well, thank you much for this opportunity to be here. And I was just sitting here thinking, this must be the southern end of girls' rule, because I was a little girl in the panhandle of Florida in Pensacola, and I think we are all, we all went to the beach one day, and probably, we're all there at the same time. But I always grew up having a real love of science, and ever since just about that I could walk, I knew I wanted to be a scientist, and I was lucky I had a super supportive family. My mom thought I was a little weird when she would find her tweezers and things used for experiments that I would have done in the yard, but she got over that. And I bet y'all didn't know that you could freeze a lizard in an ice tray and it comes back to life even the next morning. But be sure if you do that you hide it from your parents, because they'll be afraid if they go to get that ice cube and put it in their drink for dinner. Which that happened too. So, but luckily I had a very, very supportive family, and ended up going to school at the University of Florida, and not surprisingly, I majored in zoology, which I really did. I love zoology, but I really did view it as a stepping stone, because I decided I wanted to skip the master's and go straight for a PhD, and I went to University of South Florida College of Medicine and got that in medical sciences with specialization in immunology and medical microbiology, and then stayed in Tampa for years as faculty. And then was looking for a change. I was recruited to Houston, and so I've really only been in Houston since 2003. So I was kind of felt like home, though. There's a lot of similarities between Florida and Houston. So now I want to also take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space, which is headquartered at Space Life Sciences Lab at Kennedy Space Center. And so I guess I'll start off with the first slide, or next one, please. Thanks. Well, I was asked to talk about how we can use the International Space Station as a research and technology testbed for missions beyond low Earth orbit. And we're all aware now, and thankfully so, that the space station is fully assembled. And it really is the foundation for spaceflight operations, for understanding the effects of spaceflight on humans, and for being a platform that we can learn and test and experiment in ways that can help us get to other destinations. Operations and research and development on station will be happening for the U.S. at least through 2020, and we hope that it's a test bed for well beyond that point. Next slide, please. So what does this mean to use ISS as a sustained research platform? Well, we have conditions of reduced gravity as well as other extremes in temperature and in radiation and all the factors that we have to consider for voyages beyond low Earth orbit. The station will facilitate and support varying types of experimental operations across a discipline of sciences, across biological sciences and materials research and Earth sensing, radiation. It also is important for us to develop autonomous and minimal crew time interface with our experiments. And it provides for a wonderful observation platform to secure how we will do sampling and analysis on orbit and storage capabilities. Again, these are things that we need for using station as a research and development testbed, and also for using station to propel us to destinations beyond low Earth orbit. We can use it for technology capabilities, And there is existing hardware and technology being utilized now. And now that ISS is open for R&D 24/7, we can also use this to develop new kinds of technology that we're going to be needing. Next slide, please. And I want to talk a little bit about a portion of the ISS that has been set aside for a United States National Laboratory. In 2005, Congress set aside a portion of the U.S. capability, U.S. Segment of station, to be the world's only United States orbiting national laboratory. And in 2010, Congress asked NASA to set up a nonprofit organization to manage, independently from NASA, the R&D that would occur in national laboratory. And this is R&D that occurs in conjunction with exploration-based technology. And this is really for non-NASA uses. So this is open to the entire research community, the academic community, to commercial industry, to our partners, to utilize the absolutely unique platform that exists on ISS so that we can develop better products for Earth. And in doing so, obviously, some of these products will be used to get us to our next destination in conjunction with the wonderful things that Ginger talked about. We're just this week entering our 9th week of operations, and I'm very excited to report we've brought on most of our senior management positions, which is really exciting. Anyone that's ever done a startup from a piece of paper knows that it is not an easy endeavor, but it's a very exciting one, particularly for us, and everyone that we've brought on has a real passion for space, and so we already have a quote corporate culture, which is a very strong ethics-based R&D approach, and a passion for research and development, and a true passion for space. Our goals really are to support a diversified portfolio across all of the disciplines and really return all the investments that have been made in ISS back to the American people. And I can say with assurance that many of these, I believe, will not only make life better on Earth, but will also get us to the path we need for exploration-based activities. Next slide, please. Just at National Laboratory, NASA's been managing the lab for about 4 years. They've set up a variety of memorandum of understanding and memorandum of agreement with other government agencies, as well as Space Act agreements with a variety of industry partners. Those will be transitioning over to CASIS over the coming, say, next 6 to 7 months. And then we'll be kind of at the helm ourselves, and they'll throw the life raft off, and we'll be sailing across space, and also funding our own R&D. One of the exciting capabilities, I think, that can impact both exploration-based activities as well as making products for Earth is we're going to be setting up a concept called the marketplace. And this is something new for organizations that do R&D, where we'll be able to create a platform or a forum for industry partners and for funders from a variety of commercial sectors to be matched with fabulous science and with investigators that are doing this work, technology demonstrations, new types of R&D for biology, for radiation detection. These two groups that do not necessarily talk to each other, or actually multiple groups in these two sectors, will be brought together and facilitated to hopefully come up with joint ways to fund some really great science that is going to get us places beyond low Earth orbit. Next slide, please. The kinds of R&D and technology demonstrations that we're talking about here really, in large part, deal with habitation issues, with life support. Excuse me, I have this tickle that has just arrived since I've gotten to DC, and I don't know what it is, but I'm allergic to something in this town. It couldn't be Congress, I'm quite sure, but anyway. Also, robotics activities. We talked about Robonaut earlier. Environmental monitoring, very important issues, particularly when you're thinking about long-term travel in a very confined vehicle. And then the last image I just put up there to talk about the importance of technology transfer. This is an example of an Earth imaging technology that's been used to enhance medical imaging, and it's a technology called a MedSeg system that came out of Goddard Space Center. And this is one application where it has been shown to really enhance imaging of breast tissue to better detect smaller lesions. So there are so many uses for the technology that we develop for space in general, and that which will be furthered using ISS. Next slide, please. So obviously we've talked here about using ISS as an exploration testbed, also using our R&D activities that occur there to mitigate risk to the human system, and advancing exploration partnerships. As I mentioned, CASIS will be very interested in helping in that regard. As a research platform and as an economic development platform. One thing that as an organization we believe in strongly is that we have to really create the market for space, the marketplace for using space, not just for all of us that are interested in aerospace and in exploration and traveling beyond station, but also for investors to have a real place that they can fund ventures in and realize that those ventures are going to be producing very solid and tangible returns. So then the question becomes, could ISS modules be the first part of exploration? And I'll end with the final slide, which was provided by Bill Gerstenmaier's office, which really shows that NASA is pursuing a capabilities-driven framework, and there are definitely many steps ahead, but they all do start with ISS. And we think that ISS will be a very strong R&D and technology platform for activities ahead. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. Let's see, I'll start with how I got here. It's actually a very personal family story. Come from born and raised in Florida, so I grew up in the shadow of the Saturn rocket. And kind of come from a broken family, half Lockheed, half McDonnell Douglas. It was pretty sad, you know, which to pick, father or mother. They were very supportive, and I knew from the get-go that I wanted to work with teams. And I didn't have to be the captain of the team, but I liked to work with teams and the dynamics of the personalities and the goals and the success thereof, and very competitive in that nature. And being good in math and science, I got wonderful counsel from my father, who said he was a business major, worked for Lockheed, and he said, if you like working with teams, and since you're good in science and math, I suggest you go into engineering. I said, well, I don't really like to do the detailed design. And he said, no, you get your engineering degree and you can decide from there. You may find something that you have a passion for that you want to pursue, lizards with tweezers.
I never hurt them. It was all
No, science, for the science. They came back to life.
They did.
They did.
Sure of it.
Yes. And so I pursued engineering. I selected electrical engineering, had no desire to do circuits or any of the classical electrical, but it was probably not a science that was intuitive, whereas the mechanical, which I preferred more, was more intuitive. So I left that to my own studies and got the classical definition of electrical engineering. And that strategy paid off well, because it made me a better chief engineer, having the classical studies in electrical, and then the desire and the passion around the mechanical side. So I was able to throw the red flag on multiple projects from a chief engineering perspective. So I started, as I said, in the shadow of the rockets, and it was only natural for me to move into the rockets as a first business, and then ultimately got the call to come to the human spaceflight side, and I was certain that they had the wrong number or name. And so when I quizzed them in the interview process, probably not the best theory for interview processes, why do you want me? And it turned out that they weren't looking for the classical chief engineer to design the spacecraft, the satellites, but they were looking for someone who wanted to put teams together and be successful in the teaming environment. So that was a natural fit for me, so that's how I ended up in Houston. about the same time that Jeannie got there, so we were following each other. And so that's kind of my history and how I got here. Now, I knew that Jeannie was going to talk about how ISS could be used from a science perspective, and so I've left that to her capable hands. I'm going to talk a little bit about parlaying on her last slides. How can ISS be used from an exploration standpoint, and in fact, a jumping off point for the base camp? But I'm only going to spend a little bit of time there, look at some of the pictures and the possibilities, not only of the existing hardware that we have, but some of the technology that is yet to be developed. Spend just a little bit of time to whet your appetite, and I want to save and grant my extra time to Sarah Lynn because I want to hear about the sex and space part. So we'll save some time there, make sure we don't eat up all that time. All right, next page. This slide has a couple clicks. Go ahead and build it out. One more and one more. Okay, so Jeannie talked a little bit about the evolution of the ISS systems. We certainly could use that from a support exploration side. Test bed, touching on that from new technologies, as well as the test bed for the science and the platforms that could support that, using ISS as an analog associated with the capabilities. And then what I'm going to talk about today is as a base camp and literally stepping off point. Next page. As I had indicated, this could be used to go in depth into multiple destinations, from a near Earth to telescopes and repair to Moon and Mars. I'm going to touch on just a little bit from a NEO perspective, the near Earth objects, and then to Mars as we're focused on that, using the libration points associated with the platform. Next page. As I indicated, this is technology that exists today. We have node systems that are available using the structural test assembly. We have 2 MPLMs available that could be used, and the airlocks could be modified coming out of the orbiter systems from a solar array perspective and actually be used as the airlock systems. International modules would enable us to continue the investment that we have in the international community that's been so successful in ISS. So this exploration platform that we're talking about could be assembled and then brought to the libration points and be a stepping off point for platforms. On the next page, you can see that we would need 2 separate means from a redundancy perspective to provide crew access to this EP or exploration platform. MPCV is available, and a Soyuz type vehicle would also be capabilities. On the next page, looking at the near Earth orbit on one more page. One more page. Great, thank you. Launch systems, preparing for the NEO, and this would be a similar launch systems. You can see there on the right-hand side, left-hand side, the launcher system and then the exploded view, looking at the MPLM and then the SEP, so the electrical power system from the solar system yet to be developed. So some technology exists, and then technology that we're bringing online. And then the second launch would be the tug systems associated carrying the kick stage. So as you arrive there, then it would take crew for activation, and then after crew activation, and you could even apply inflatable systems to that for crews. And on the next page, transit to the asteroid could take as much as 5 months, and total mission time a year. And you see the large SEP with the inflatable in the front, as well as the kick stage in the back. Technologies that we've put to use before and assembled could bring us to the NEOs. Let's look at it from exploration. Next page, and one more page. Apologize for turning around to face, but make sure you guys are looking at the same picture I have. From a Mars cargo perspective, you're looking at Mars windows being approximately 2 years apart, and so you would send your cargo and your equipment early and then follow it up with crew. And so the first thing to go would be the cargo vehicle departing. The ELM is in the foreground on the right-hand side, and you see the departing vehicle. The major feature in the towards the back as it's moving is the inflatable system, and the SEP in the front leading the way. So you would deliver the cargo associated with that, and it would have a 3rd-generation HAB, already exist, cargo lander, and all the supplies. and they would be assembled there at the EP and then launched on the way to Mars. On the next page, cargo lander would use an aero capture and descent, an inflatable system there that you see, the large disc absorbing the heat. And at Mars, the cargo lander would separate from the SE tug, and the inflatable aeroshell is showed there for acceleration, and then you would have those supplies on ground systems. The second vehicle leaving on the next page, thank you, would be the crew vehicle departing from the Lagrange point. And you see the system there, same SCB, same step, and in this case you would have the lander with the LOX methane ascent vehicle at its core, and that's based on the lunar lander design, so we would use the same designs over and over, and that saves us time as well as to check out the systems. And the Mars crew delivery mission follows the same basic trajectory as the cargo missions. Not to be outdone from a science perspective, on the next page you can see just to show you the time period we would depart the Lagrange point 2, and it would take approximately 246.9 approximately days from a thrust segment perspective, and then we would do a spiral descent at Mars taking about 40 days. So you can see the time frame 23/3 in the April time frame to arriving that subsequent January. And the next page, this is a pictorial view. You can see the supplies would be in the background, and the human vehicle, crew vehicle in the foreground, and gives you relative size there. Those are ladies, approximately 5'9", shown on the bottom of the screen. Not that I'm 5'9", but just in case, just in case. This system, the way that it's designed, has all of the escape fuel and capabilities that it needs should there be a problem in this one vehicle. Previous analogies had the fuel needing to be transported and moved between the two vehicles. So in this system, it's much safer. You would have that system. If something were to go wrong, you could abort directly from that system. And on the next page, from an ascent vehicle at the end of the surface mission, the crew departs, excuse me, departs with the LOX methane ascent vehicle, only partially in order to save fuel. It would come up to the low Earth orbit on the next page, performs a rendezvous with a ferry stage, and in that low Earth orbit, and climbs out to the SEP tug for at the Mars synchronous orbit. So on the next page, you see the ferry tug delivering the crew back to the orbital IHAB rendezvous and in the inflatable HAB and the SEP systems. And on the next page, returning to the ELM Lagrange point with its multiple vehicles on the exploration platform. So on the next page, a flexible path for exploration is what we're looking for, and ISS can provide that using existing technologies as well as developmental technologies and testing them out in a safe way. So with that, I'll yield my time.
Thank you, Joy. Okay, so Karen.
Hello, I'm Karen Schonork with SpaceX, and while I do come from a long line of engineers, and I am from the South, I'm from Texas, I, as you probably guessed, am not an engineer myself. But I'm very honored to be on the panel with such distinguished women today and have the opportunity to talk to you about how we could possibly use the Falcon and Dragon system to reach Mars in the next 10 years, I guess, or less. So moving forward with that, the next slide, please. So as you can see here, these are our transportation systems that we've developed at SpaceX. We have our Falcon 9 shown to your left there, integrated with the Dragon capsule. That would be the Falcon 9 Dragon flight that was, we're very proud to say, I know you've all heard it before, the first private spacecraft to orbit, re-enter, and be recovered from low Earth orbit. That happened at the end of last year, and we're looking forward to our next flight of that same system. That'll be the first system in the commercial orbital transportation, the COTS program, to demonstrate capability of berthing with the space station. From there, we're very pleased to continue our partnership with NASA under the commercial resupply services contract that we have with them. And So moving forward, though, with our systems here, you can see the picture of the Dragon there on the far side. That is the Dragon that was the first Dragon to re-enter and be recovered. And then between those, you have pictures of our Falcon there, and it's our Falcon 9 with the fairing payload, but also our Falcon Heavy, which is in development right now. Falcon Heavy's first flight is expected to be 2013, and it is what I'll be discussing today as the transport for the Dragon to Mars. Next slide, please. So focusing on the Dragon system first, as I mentioned, the Dragon system, or the Dragon, is our capsule for accessing the International Space Station. And as I mentioned, it'll be berthing there probably the very beginning of next year. We're also taking that same capsule and modifying it in order to be able to carry crew to the International Space Station, currently in partnership with NASA under CCDEV, as are some of my other colleagues up here. That capsule is the same capsule with some slight other modifications that we believe could be used to reach Mars. And the idea there is that the integrated abort system that we're using for the launch abort system for the crew would be a system that would also be used for retropropulsion for the landing on the Mars, on Mars. As many of you have heard, Elon Musk discussed in the past, SpaceX was designed from day one to carry people, and it was also designed from day one to reach Mars. The idea of an interplanetary, of humans being interplanetary is definitely one of the company and his personal goals. So for that reason, the Dragon systems already have most of the necessary capabilities for reaching Mars. Sufficient lifetime and resources for Mars transfer trajectory, atmospheric entry systems capable of a guided lifting entry, and also highly capable throttleable retropropulsion thrusters. Those are the propulsion thrusters that will be part of our launch abort system. And then, as you can see here, the Dragon system is both the capsule and the trunk, shown there with the solar panels. Oops, I already passed this as the slide. Can you go back a slide? Sorry about that. Risk of not having a monitor here. So, as you can see, the capsule there and the trunk with the solar panels. All right, next slide. The Red Dragon and Falcon Heavy. We're referring to our Mars Dragon as the Red Dragon, as I'm sure you guessed. So one of the big benefits of this system is that it is a low-cost system. One of the goals of SpaceX is to be able to decrease the cost of accessing space by a factor of 10. The goal for the Red Dragon Falcon Heavy integrated system is around $200 million system for a launch vehicle and the lander. That would not include the payload, but it's a very affordable system for reaching the Martian surface. As I mentioned, the Dragon system needs minimal modifications. That's one of the reasons why it would be so affordable for this trip. The Falcon Heavy is targeted at being able to carry 50 metric tons to low Earth orbit. That translates to 10 tons to Mars. When you integrate the Dragon and a potential payload, you get to a payload of about 1 ton. And that would put the Dragon with its payload, so that's having ejected the trunk before it went to land on Mars. And its payload is the largest system to land on Mars in terms of weight. So that implies the next point, which is that would provide a high payload and large interior volume for what we could actually deliver to the Martian surface. And again, that we're basing this technology and its design and making sure that it would be scalable at some point to human carriage. Next slide. So the concept for this Mars mission is to make those modifications to Dragon. So if you take the Dragon that is our low Earth orbit ISS berthing or docking Dragon, you would be able to remove that berthing hardware, which removes some weight from the Dragon. And then you would add systems that are necessary and unique to the Mars missions, as shown the deep space communications that would be necessary. Once you launched on the Falcon Heavy from Earth, the Falcon Heavy would be able to put the Dragon into TMI. Once the Dragon separates from the Falcon stages, you'd have the Dragon and the trunk moving together with the solar panels in order to power it to reach Mars. It would eject that trunk, as I mentioned, and then use the launch abort system once it moved from hypersonic to supersonic to actually land on legs on the Martian surface. So, next slide. make sure it's right. All right, the next slide shows the powered descent and landing. As I mentioned, our low Earth orbit crew, ISS crew vehicle includes an integrated abort system. This was designed to be the safest system. It, for the purpose of crew, diminishes the need for separation events. When you have a tower system for your launch abort system, then you have a separation event. By integrating it into the capsule, you no longer have that separation event, and you have the capability for abort further into launch, and also for use for reentry. So initially, we'll be able to test this system on reentry into Earth's atmosphere. First, as we test it for launch abort systems, and then eventually using it for controlled reentry, and then eventually actually testing our ability to land on legs. The Mars version will use that same technology and that same propulsion system. So we'll have a good amount of flight heritage in the low Earth atmosphere and Earth landing missions before we actually send it to Mars. And again, that propulsion system will be throttleable, which is the key ability to actually use it to land on the Martian surface. All right, with that, I think I have a video that should be able to show. And just to kind of give you a preface on the video is not Mars specific. It is generally about our system, but gives you a sense of the launch abort system that we're designing, and then eventually how that would be used for landing.
If there had been people sitting in the Dragon capsule today, they would have had a very nice ride. There's only one major development item, and that is the launch escape system. We're going to build the escape engines into the sidewall of the spacecraft. You'll actually be able to have escape capability all the way to orbit. Even the Apollo didn't have that. Also, because you don't have to release the escape tower every time, you don't have that as a necessary thing that has to occur with every flight. Crew capability is the very reason SpaceX was founded. So we will do whatever we need to do to make this happen.
So as you can see, one of the exciting things about using the launch abort system for the Martian landing is that it actually it's a very simple system. It is only the retrofired engines. There's no parachute system or any other system that could potentially go wrong or cause any kind of potential failures between the entry and the actual landing. So again, it's part of the principle that we kind of follow at SpaceX in trying to keep things simple, and then and in that regard, also making sure that we have a great available capability, for reusability in our systems as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Linda.
Okay, first just a few words about how I got to where I am today. First of all, though, I want to thank Explore Mars and all the sponsors of today's conference for allowing me to be up here and talk about two very important subjects, exploring Mars and the Orion Multipurpose Crew Vehicle. I got here because I enjoyed math and science in school, from elementary school through high school. And I had a very supportive family, but I have to agree with some of the comments of some of the panelists in the previous session. A father can be an extremely powerful influence on a daughter. And my father was just that. He was extremely supportive at a time when, I'm going to age myself a little bit here, but at a time when a lot of fathers sent their daughters to college to find a husband to support them. My father sent me to college and instilled in me that I needed to get a good education doing something I enjoyed and something I would be good at so that I could be independent, so that I could support myself if I needed to, and have a fulfilling career. he was in the aerospace industry himself, so he brought a lot of that experience. But he was always there for me to encourage me, and we lost my father earlier this year, but up until he became quite ill, he would always want to know how my job was going. And even when his memory started slipping, every time I go see him, he'd ask me, "So what is it you're doing right now?" And he'd always want my business card so he could show it to all of his friends in the retirement community. And he was a real inspiration. Now, when I was getting ready to graduate from high school and begin college, it was back at a time when high school counselors who worked with girls that had strengths in math and science always said, "You'd be a great teacher, you should be a teacher." And I know we've all got some teaching in us, but I think to be a great teacher is a calling. It really is. And it's very rare to find just that exceptional teacher. And I wanted to be exceptional in whatever I did. So I kept waiting for that calling, I kept listening, and nothing was coming. I didn't hear anything. And as I was beginning college, I had an opportunity to go to work for Bell Helicopter in their intern program. And I worked in their dynamics organization in Texas. Actually, there's Texas, there's a southern girl. And I loved it. I found what I wanted to do there in engineering, but I wanted to work in the space program. I was a product. I was in high school during the first moon landing, and that's what I wanted to do. So I found my spot in Lockheed Martin 33 years ago, and the rest is history. But anyway, that's how I got to where I am now. First, in my briefing, I want to give an overview of the Orion multipurpose crew vehicle, and then I'll talk a little bit about a Mars exploration mission that we in Lockheed Martin have assessed. So if I could have the next chart, please. The Orion spacecraft is NASA's vehicle that will transport astronauts to exploration destinations beyond low Earth orbit. We have a wonderful Lockheed Martin industry team that was awarded the contract in August of 2006. So we have 5 years behind us on this program. We've made exceptional progress. Everything you see in this chart is part of Orion. When you hear people talk about Orion, this is it. It's a modular design. Of course, the heart and soul of the vehicle is the crew module, which you see in the very center of the chart. This is where the astronauts will ride and live during transport to multiple destinations beyond low Earth orbit. We have already designed and successfully tested a launch board system for Orion. The test was conducted in May of 2010 at the White Sands Missile Test Range, and it was extremely successful. This is the piece of the vehicle that will safely transport the crew away from the launch vehicle in the unlikely event of a catastrophic launch failure. So it is really it's quite an advanced system. It incorporates a lot of advanced technology and propulsion, and we're very pleased that we were able to successfully demonstrate the performance of this system. The service module that you see at the back end of the vehicle it contains the power and propulsion that sees the crew through their flight, and it's all modular, which certainly is a good way to design a vehicle to ensure crew safety. Next chart, please. The vehicle definitely has a familiar shape. It's a capsule, like Apollo, but certainly that's where the similarity ends. Orion has 2.5 times more usable volume than Apollo had. Not to take away from Apollo, it was an amazing achievement at its time. It really was. But Orion can carry a crew of 4 versus the crew of 3 that Apollo carried. And Orion can operate autonomously on orbit. That means that all 4 crew members can go to the surface of the moon or the destination to actually do exploration, and Orion can stay parked in orbit for as long as 180 days for a lunar mission. And again, this vehicle will support multiple destination missions. It's primarily designed because when we were put on contract, first mission was to the moon. So the primary design approach was for a lunar mission. But the flexible design approach that NASA's kept us on board with throughout the program has allowed the vehicle to evolve and design so that we can support multiple missions to multiple destination missions. Next chart, please. Baby pictures. We got a lot of baby pictures. We're not on paper anymore. We are hardware. This chart shows a full-scale test article that's currently undergoing ground testing at our Denver facility. It's undergoing structural testing, vibration, and acoustics testing there. We're well through that test period. It's a structurally flight-worthy article. It could fly. The structure could. Now, the crew members you see in the photo on your left are crew members from NASA that are supporting us on the program. And following these tests in Denver, the vehicle will be sent to the Langley Research Center where it'll undergo a series of landing tests at the hydro impact basin there. More baby pictures, more progress. The 2010 NASA Authorization Act provided the framework for a sustainable national program, a government program of deep space human exploration. The Act does call for a multi-purpose crew vehicle to carry astronauts to deep space destinations. Earlier this year, NASA did endorse Orion as the multi-purpose crew vehicle. I'm sure you all saw the news. For deep space human exploration. It provides a very important building block for a sustainable national program. And Orion is delivering on its promises and commitments. We're on schedule. We're well within the budget guidelines that NASA's provided to us. So we've done this while we've also streamlined the program to align with a more constrained budget. We all know we're in a very difficult economic environment. And we've worked hard with our NASA customer to streamline the program so that we can continue to make good progress. So by delivering on these promises, the Orion program has strengthened the industry-NASA relationship, instilled congressional confidence in the program, which we can't underestimate the importance of that, and we've promoted a positive image of space out there in the public. We hope. We can do a better job of this, and that's why a lot of these sessions today have been very enlightening. Next chart, please. Technology investments. We are investing in technology, we and our teammates on Orion. Our major teammates who are supporting the program and investing in bringing key technologies for the program include Aerojet, ATK, Hamilton Sundstrand, and USA. And we have 5, at any given time, and this number changes almost daily, at any given time we have almost 500 suppliers across the country working on the program. It's really amazing the scale of expertise that has come forward to help us with this one. Technology investments should address both near-term and long-term exploration challenges. And the investment in technology is key for a number of reasons. Most importantly, though, for sustainable exploration program that's designed to span decades, the key assets you need to explore, the launch vehicle, the spacecraft, landers, habitats, should be designed so that you can easily incorporate technological advancements and enhance affordability. So that's why it's key to start looking at these advanced technologies early in the design phase of the program. Next chart. So, keys to a sustainable exploration program, affordable approach, definitely. If you're not affordable, you're going to be canceled. That's fact of life. Demonstrated performance to a program plan, and we've done that on Orion. A very focused technology demonstration portfolio. Manage and adapt change, whether it's change in budget or change in requirements or change in technology advancements. You have to be agile to adapt to those changes. And then, of course, it all boils down to continuing your political support. So if we can go to the next chart, I'm going to change gears for just a minute, talk about an approach that we at Lockheed Martin, now this is purely a notional concept that we at Lockheed Martin have assessed for a stepping stone mission approach. It's a result of internal Lockheed Martin investment, and of course NASA continues to assess a mission profile. And I think that's, obviously we're going to follow our customer's lead. As NASA develops that profile, we'll be there to support them. But this stepping stone approach includes a series of increasingly challenging destinations, ultimately, of course, leading to the human exploration of Mars. And central to all of these stepping stone missions you see on these charts, whether it's an asteroid mission or Lagrange point mission or a Mars mission, central to all of these is scientific discovery as we move forward. Next chart, please. So, looking at a Martian moon mission. You've heard maybe about what we call the Red Rocks missions. It's part of the stepping stone sequence in which a landing on a Martian moon would follow a Plymouth Rock mission to a near-Earth asteroid. A mission to a Martian moon allows astronauts to first explore Mars from a relatively benign environment that is a little easier to do for a first mission than exposing your humans to the harsher environment of the Mars surface. A Martian moon mission would permit teleoperation of rovers without the time delay you see due to speed of light time. So these are some of the benefits we see in possibly doing a lunar Martian moon mission before an actual Mars landing. Next chart, please. We compared the pros and cons of a mission to Deimos versus a mission to Phobos. There's pros and cons to both, certainly advantages to both. But we looked at trying to do a mission without a lot of new technology requirements in the near term, given the budget constraints we're under. Delta V for a round-trip mission to Deimos is approximately 400 meters per second lower than for a Phobos mission. So what that actually means is your propulsion is easier. You don't have to carry as much propellant. Communications access is better from Deimos than from Phobos. There's almost a constant line of sight from Deimos to Earth, and there's twice as much sunlight on Deimos as there is on Phobos. So all of these things weigh into making decisions. There's certainly pros to Phobos mission as well, but all in all, our assessment shows that maybe a Deimos mission might be a good one for the first human exploration of Mars. You don't need a lot of, next chart please, don't need a lot of new technology advancement, as I said. You can do a solar-powered versus a nuclear-powered mission. And so you don't need those huge advancements in propulsion technology to start designing this mission. Next chart. So, it's been said that in human spaceflight, Mars is the destination that matters. By the mid-2030s, a human precursor mission to Deimos will offer a rare opportunity to more easily explore Mars from a relatively safe and scientifically rich vantage point. Orion will be the vehicle that will safely transport astronauts to and from deep space destinations, ensuring continued U.S. leadership in space. One more comment I want to make. Last night at our reception, I met a young lady by the name of Hero Magnus. Give us a wave, Hero. Hero is in the 6th grade in Alexandria, and she said that she's dreamed of being the first human on Mars since she was 2 years old. So, Hero, Orion is your ride, and Deimos is your destination in 2033. You should be about the right age then. Let's make your dream a reality, Hero. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Sarah Lynn.
Great. Well, I'd first like to thank the conference organizers for giving me the opportunity to be part of this great panel. And I am so happy to hear Linda mention Denver. I think I'm your token Westerner on this panel because I am from Denver, Colorado. And I actually feel like John Elway at the clock at 2 minutes and there are no more timeouts. So I'm going to speak rather quickly. I have a set of slides, but too many, so I'm just going to speak if that's all right. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about my background. Grew up in Colorado, and my mom, also a native Coloradoan, went to college and was pulled out because at the time, girls didn't go if the brothers wanted to go and there wasn't enough money, and I think she wanted to be a teacher. My father was from Europe. He survived 4 concentration camps as a child and came to Colorado because it reminded him of the mountains of Romania. And he spoke 7 languages, but not English very well. So when they had their children, you can imagine we didn't have a lot of money, and at the time we didn't know that because we were surrounded by books. And we read. We read to my father, my mother read to us, and we just had this incredible thirst for learning, for knowledge, for exploration, for going out and seeing the world, collecting rocks. And I actually remember painting rocks and then trying to sell them. So I guess the entrepreneurial spirit started young. I'm happy to say that they educated their children. I have 2 sisters, older sisters who graduated from college. My twin brother is an electrical, chemical, and a computer engineer. And I became what every little girl dreams of, and that is a doctor who wants to practice medicine at that time on the moon. Now I would change it to Mars. As I work over at NASA headquarters in the Office of the Chief Health Medical Officer, and we're helping to develop medical standards. My other love was women's health, and at the time that I was in my training, we really didn't know much about women's health. It was what we called bikini medicine. For some of you in the room, that may sound familiar. We focused on our reproductive organs, maybe through in breast tissue, and then we did women's health. And I knew there was something missing, and while I was at University of California, San Francisco, I wanted to do more. So I designed a fellowship to quote-unquote focus on the older woman, and at that time, that was the woman over the age of 50. Ridiculous now, isn't it? But it was really a wonderful way for me to get training in endocrinology, which is the study of hormones, and geriatrics, which is the study of older individuals. And I found that both of those disciplines have been very helpful for me as I've moved through my career, both at HHS, NASA, and academia. Now, often, if I give a talk on sex and space, I have to admit there are a lot more men in the room. And I know what all you're thinking. So I hope this doesn't disappoint you too much, but we're going to be focusing on sex and gender-based health care. And that, of course, includes reproductive health, but it goes so far beyond that. Now, when I talk about sex and gender, I look at that as an element of human factors. Earlier, you heard my definition from the Institute of Medicine. But keep in mind that at NASA, and really at any agency organization, when you think of human factors, it's not just male or female. We look at age, we look at culture, we look at race, we look at ethnicity, we look at the socioeconomic environment that shapes an individual. And these are really important as we design vehicles to take us to Mars, as we design technology to learn about disease, as we develop the tools to teach our students. We need to understand those factors so we can serve both boys and girls well. Now, I don't want us to use sex and gender as a form of discrimination. It's not a question of who is better, who is faster, who is smarter. It just allows us to be able to define who is the individual so we can move into the realm of personalized medicine so we can better treat both women and men very well. Now, I know I have about 360 seconds to do this round-the-world tour. No, thank you. To talk about some of the key health issues focused on going to Mars and really long-duration missions. But what's really exciting for me as an endocrinologist and as a geriatrician, I look at space as this phenomenal platform to study, to celebrate accelerated aging. Because a lot of our countermeasures, and those are the methods that we use to reverse some of the things that happen to the body, we can also reverse some of the signs of aging. And the extensive rehabilitation that our astronauts undergo when they come back also minimizes some of the changes that the body undergoes to adapt to that microgravity environment of space. So I think it's really exciting. There are a lot of lessons learned from space travel that's going to provide us healthier aging for all of us here on this planet who may never venture to Mars, except perhaps virtually, but hopefully we'll live to the day so we can see everyone go into Mars. And just as a caveat, and this I'm not speaking on behalf of NASA at all, but more as a geriatrician, I hope that maybe perhaps NASA will partner with Medicare so that the perfect age to going to Mars will be over the age of 65. And think about it, because some of the issues that we focus in on bone fragility may not be as much a concern because, as bone changes, it's really having that fracture. And if you're a little less concerned that you have 60 more years of living with those bones, radiation exposure is certainly another rate-limiting step, and that's for the development of cancer, and you're maybe a little less concerned because you may not have 20, 30 years for latency for that. And then certainly the social interactions, the maturity level may be important, so I would lobby for that. Now, let's talk about 6 key areas that we have to really be concerned about for our health as we go to Mars, as we go on our long-duration missions. And let's start, as we heard this morning, with musculoskeletal health. On Earth, 80% of those who are afflicted with osteoporosis, and that's a state of low bone density, generally are women. Now, we have around less than 40 million Americans have the disease or are at risk for it. And part of the reason is because men build more bone density as they're growing. We build most of our bone mass by the time we're 30. And then for women, we tend to accelerate our bone loss through menopause. Now, in space, as we heard this morning, what may take only about 1% of loss per year for most of us in this room over the age of 30. In space, that can be accelerated to 1 to 3 to 5% per individual. So think about it, as we just heard about what it took to go to Mars, what are your bones going to look like when you arrive on the planet and then hopefully when you come back to Earth? Now, we look at bone density, but we also look at bone quality, and we're just trying to understand the impact of those 2 factors. So we know women are at potentially higher risk, but it's something that we have to worry about for both men and women. And this is where I think men get sort of the short end of the stick, so to speak, is that a lot of the drugs that we focus on Earth has really been geared towards the treatment of postmenopausal osteoporosis. So we're going to have to learn how to better treat both male and female astronauts in regard to nutrition, physical activity using resistance exercise, and certainly pharmaceuticals to be able to protect our bones. We also lose bone mass. As we age, there's a condition called sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. And we lose muscle as we go into space as well. And there are different types of muscle fibers. And I have to say, as we're coming into the 2012 Olympics, no matter how well a woman trains, she's never going to run as fast as a man. And it's not because she's not a good runner. It's because there's differences in muscle fibers. And women tend to have more fibers that provide endurance. Men tend to have them more for this increased burst of energy. And in space, you lose both, but there tends to be a shift, and some of the decrements of muscle loss tend to be greater in men than what we see in women. Now, the challenges that we have for space travel is that a lot of our samples traditionally have been pooled for men and women, so trying to discern those differences is something that we're really now going down to the detail level. Prior to that, the samples were pooled for both men and women. Let's talk about heart disease. #1 killer for both men and women in the United States. Over 500,000 people die each year, women, men as well. We often talked about it being an atypical disease for women, that they didn't present the same way as men. Well, women present very typically for women, and it could be nausea, vomiting, shortness of breath. The challenge we've had is that when we've used an angiogram, a little tube that goes into the blood vessel, we tend to miss disease in women because often the disease is in the small vessel. So we know that women's vascular systems are very different from men. Hormonally, they respond differently. Women have more estrogen, which causes increased of heart rate when they're stressed. Men, when they're stressed, have a lot of testosterone, and they get vasoconstriction. They shunt down, they clamp down. That helps them to maintain blood pressure. So what we have often seen with some of our astronauts coming back from space, when there's been volume changes and their little volume depleted and they're very stressed coming back, is that many of our female astronauts have felt dizzy, or what we call experiencing orthostatic hypotension. Again, it's not a deficiency, it's a normal reaction of how their body has adapted to the space environment. Because when you're in space, there's a cephalic distribution. What does that mean? That means blood flows from the legs to the head. So as you look at some of the pictures that we saw this morning, some of our astronauts tend to have puffier faces, and it's because there's more fluid flowing to the head. Well, the body senses you're in volume overload, and so you start diuresing, you start peeing out a lot of this fluid. The fluid shifts from the blood vessels into what we call third space, so into the face and into other parts of the body. So this is something that we are very concerned about, because if you're landing on the planet Mars, which is about 3/8 gravity, you can't go off your vehicle and feel like you're going to faint. So we put a lot of time and attention. We're going to have to do more on that. Another important area is the neurological system. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the last panel. How many of you in this room think that men and women think differently? We almost have universal agreement on that. Well, men and women's brains are very different. There is different wiring, and women's brains have what we call a very active corpus callosum. That's that highway that goes between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. And so what we find is, for example, if a woman has had trauma, whether unfortunately like a gunshot wound or a stroke or some type of event to the brain, women tend to regain the use of speech faster and more efficiently compared to men, because the other hemisphere tends to pick up. It's a fascinating system. And so what we're trying to see is this neuroplasticity, does that increase in space? So we've had some very interesting experiments looking at this, and to discern sex differences, I think, will be very important as well. We know on Earth that women tend to have more motion sickness compared to men. There's a condition in space called space sickness, and that's within the first few days, where some of our astronauts feel a little bit nauseous, and it may be because there's also a disconnect between what the eyes are seeing and what the ears, the little otoliths, the little sensors in the ears are sensing you're falling back at Earth at over 17,000 miles per hour. After a few days, the body equilibrates. It's really remarkable, and you tend to feel better. But again, this may be an issue because when you land somewhere, you want to feel your best, you want to be healthy and not nauseous. So we're trying to understand, again, the differences between men and women. Moving into the immune system, this is such a fascinating area. Over 80% of the autoimmune diseases are more common in women. Think about it. Lupus, for example, rheumatoid arthritis. I can go down the list. We saw it during the swine flu epidemic, the H1N1 epidemic, and that is, we tend to believe that women are more resistant to infection, but once they get infected, they mount very, very robust responses. And pregnant women lose that resistance, so they don't reject their fetus, but they also mount those very robust responses. So what ends up happening is they get this double whammy. What we're concerned about is that when you go into space and you're being bombarded by radiation, there's all different kinds of radiation, galactic radiation, radiation from the sun, you don't have the protection of the ozone or the Earth's atmosphere, and that can lead to mutations in the cell and development of cancer, which generally takes a few years to happen. We wonder if there are going to be any sex differences in that regard. Who will be more susceptible? So this is going to be an important area. Another important area that we think about certainly is the reproductive system, and we could go on for a long time about that. And we see that men tend to have more kidney stones. They tend to, it may be due to the pH of the urine that sets them up for developing kidney stones. We also are trying to understand, how does the body adapt in space? I mean, to me, it's a fascinating question. The women on Earth who cycle, we cycle to a lunar cycle. generally 28 days. So when you go to Mars, is it going to be the Martian moon that you're going to cycle to? So it is fascinating when you think about it. And so there's a lot of areas here that we're going to try to explore, and potentially maybe through animal models we may understand it. And then one of my favorite areas is human behavior. We know there are a lot of gender differences here, and what we have found is that mixed crews tend to work better. There were some interesting studies down in Antarctica that showed if you introduced a woman into an all-male entity, men started growing more beards, the testosterone levels increased, it changed behavior. So this is something I think we really have to be attuned to, because I sincerely doubt there's probably going to be an all-female mission to Mars or an all-male mission to Mars. Maybe we could call it the Great American Space Race, or if we do it internationally, the Great Space Race. So we're going to have to learn how to work together, and the social dynamics are going to be very, very important. How men and women communicate will be very important, and that's going to determine, I think, a lot of the success of this mission. NASA has had some very interesting meetings to look at this. I see Dr. Betty Siegel in the audience. Wait, raise your hand, Betty. She and I had helped plan a meeting with the University of Missouri to look at some of the differences between men and women and how human beings adapted to extreme environments. And we put out a lot of recommendations, and it was interesting. We heard about the spacesuit. It's very important to have spacesuits that fit. We know that the hand movements are different, knee movements are different between men and women, the shoulder hip axis lengths are different, and you're going to get the best out of your core when you've got suits that fit. Just imagine if you were to wear clothing that didn't fit, how almost impossible it would be to do your job. The other important element is we're going to look at analog environments like we heard about this morning. We're going to look at computational models, animal models, and certainly human models as we go forward. And I think there are just two closing points. As we look at human health, but it's really to improve the health of men and women, both going to Mars and for our health on Earth. And since we're very close to Foggy Bottom and near the State Department, I just want to close with the words of one of our more famous Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, who said that there will be no winning the battle of the sexes because there's just too much fraternizing with the enemy. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel. Goodness. So I regret that we are not going to have time for questions. We just... Okay, great. Okay, so do we have any volunteers? I have some, but I'll let you guys go.
I guess just one comment I wanted to make is that, if I can say this right, it's just sort of a reminder that the differences between any two individuals of one gender can be greater than the differences between the genders generally.
There is a lot of intervariability, and we know that one-size-fits-all approach isn't there, but I think, again, as I mentioned, human factors, not used for discrimination, but to tailor care well.
Okay, a couple of quick questions for Dr. Mark. How important or how interesting do you think crew self-selection could be for long endurance missions like Mars? And for Karen on the SpaceX systems, I didn't see any way to come home. Did I miss something?
When you mean crew self-selection, individuals who want to go, is that what you're referring? Well, I think that's key for almost everything. It's if you have this passion to want to be there, you're willing to go through what you have to go through to be well trained, to endure, to accept the risk, to have your family. Because I also view it as not just the individual, it's the family as well. So it's really important that you have your entire family and community supporting you.
I will note that the first slide in my presentation did say human precursor. I think the presentation is generally on kind of first steps of reaching Mars, the technology that we expect to use, and how that would be used for getting there, for doing the precursor missions, investigations, experimentation, etc. Yeah.
Hi, so I have a question regarding the recent mission in Russia. I think it's in terms of long-duration human space flight, there was a mock Mars mission in Russia. I think they had like 6 crew members. It's called Mars 500.
Right.
6 crew members was in this little module for 200 some days, and they just got released. And I was wondering if the U.S., like NASA, had anything, in on it, if we know about the data and what happens with their, psychology and physical, concerns and things like that. If they're going to publish data about that or not.
I'm going to answer one part of it, and then I'm going to throw it over to Jeannie, who was with NSPR at the time or knows the background behind it. One of my comments to some of our Russian colleagues is that I think it's a fascinating experiment, but again, it would have been more valuable to have both men and women. And
was it all men?
It was all men, yeah. So I think, that's something that needs to seriously be considered. And then, Jeannie, do you want to provide some of the background of how it was negotiated?
Yes, it was a 500-day experiment, and the hatch just opened last week, you're correct. And there was a United States investigator, David Dinges, who did behavioral type studies with a bunch of, I don't know how many selected studies he did on individual crew members, but quite a few types of determinations of response times as a function of stress based on mission task as the 500 days proceeded. And it's going to take a while probably to sort through that data, but there was one U.S. investigator involved.
Hi, I'm Carrie Sheridan from Agency France Press, and I was wondering, I have two questions. One, I wanted to talk about the fact that there were no women in that test group, and how far along do you think we are, Dr. Mark, in terms of knowing how a long-term mission like an asteroid 5 months or Mars more than a year how would that take a toll on a woman's body more so than a man?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say it would take more of a toll on a woman's body versus a man. Again, certain areas are different, and what we have learned over the years is how to do specific countermeasures to protect the health of both men and women. So again, it's not a question of who's better, faster, smarter, be able to adapt. NASA has been using the International Space Station. We have at least 6 months of study. We also have done analog sites, and those will certainly increase as well. And as we heard this morning, there are other locations to see how the body adapts in different environments. I think what's interesting is that if I were to look at 2 rate-limiting steps, as I mentioned, it's bone and it's also radiation. And we need to be really clear on how to protect the body against that. And so there are wonderful experiments, and the work, again, what Jeannie's doing through her new center is going to, I think, exponentially increase what we know in partnerships with our various agencies.
Great, thanks. And I was interested in the mention of the girl who was here, and I was wondering if you could, anybody on the panel, talk a little bit more about what do the girls look like? Who are the young girls who may be the first ones to step on Mars? How old are they? What do they need to be doing? Things like that. Thanks.
Well, I did mention Hero. I don't think she's here now. She's in 6th grade. If you start looking at the first Mars missions by the mid-2030s, we've looked at the Deimos mission to span between 2033 and 2035. 6th graders, 11, 12-year-olds would probably be where you'd want to start capturing the interest and enthusiasm and encouraging students to excel in math and science and the technical areas, computer science. And I would want to emphasize that there's going to be a select few that actually go to the surface of Mars or explore a moon of Mars or any of the exploration activities. But there's such a need for good engineers, good scientists, to support those missions, to develop the vehicles that will carry crew there, the doctors and the bioengineering fields that while there are a lot of students that say, I want to be the first one on Mars or I want to go to the moon, there's so many other areas where they can really contribute to space exploration.
And I think if we don't get those little girls when they're in the 5th grade, then they're really going to miss out. You really have to start in junior high. Because if they don't get the basics then they are going to be behind when they get in high school and certainly can't make it to the college courses. So we have to capture them in junior high school.
My question was just about
if there are ever plans in place, what to do if something like a CME occurred, which is a coronal mass ejection, where it's a lot of radiation, and I noticed that you had said for I think the Deimos mission that you might go during solar maximum, but I was just wondering, isn't that one more solar activity? Like with you get more CMEs and CIRs and things like that, and I was just wondering if any of you knew of plans in place to protect against that, because I know like with some of the material science and like polymer science, the radiation poisoning is a pretty big issue with the mission, just because withstanding the 7-month trip is as much of an issue as physically fueling it.
First, I'll jump in and then maybe Dr. Mark can, but it's a little counterintuitive. During a solar max season, if you will, lunar season, you see, and this is not my area of expertise, but I'm coming off of what some of our engineers have studied, you get a higher magnetic field that protects from the emission of those cosmic rays into the inner solar system. So it is a little counterintuitive that during solar max you see less radiation effects, and that's another reason why Deimos offers maybe a better environment for an early exploration mission of Mars, because you can land in craters and get a little more protection for your crew members and your astronauts in that kind of environment than a mission to the surface of Mars.
There's also something called an acceptable level of radiation. You know you're going to be exposed. We're exposed here on Earth. So what we try to do is monitor how much radiation the astronauts are exposed to, try to minimize it. One of my concerns is that women have a different dose, a different level than men. Part of it is because organs that have high cell turnovers, such as ovarian tissue, thyroid tissue, GI tissue, breast tissue, we need to protect. And it's an area that we're really beginning to understand more and more about. So I think from the engineering side, this is going to be very critical. And I know certainly our engineering colleagues are working very hard to try to find the technology to protect the vehicle, the habitat, so that, and perhaps even the spacesuit, what could be designed so that individuals can work and perform in space and be protected. And I want to ensure that women are protected so that they can be part of these missions and not be precluded because they would have too high a radiation exposure and too high for safe measures.
Okay, thanks. And we're going to have two more really quick questions because we're way over and we want to get to the next.
Okay. So this is sort of, I'm just curious, this is more directed to Dr. Mark. So we look at all the physical changes that people, men and women, go through in like a 200-day. So I was thinking more of the emotional experience also that they go through. Would that be sort of something that we need to look at, or is that something you're already looking at? And would it change, the procedure that you go through for someone who needs to be in space for 200 days or more and just...
NASA's put a lot of effort to look at that in many studies, and they're ongoing. Again, individuals when they're selected for missions are reviewed. And mental health is an important part of healthcare. It's important for healthcare on Earth. It's important for healthcare for any kind of exploration mission. Learning modalities of how to deal with stress, helping groups learn how to work together. Certainly international groups have to learn to work together. It's very, very important. And I think the lessons that we learned from the space program will certainly have benefit for how we need to function both in a bureaucratic environment, a professional environment of any sort, military environment. It really serves us well in every environment.
Okay, last question.
Yeah, cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, when he went to space the second time, he brought with crayons with him. And that was because he realized when he went up the first time that the colors that were represented on the maps on Earth were not right. And so he wanted to go fix that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is I think that arts in space are just as important as the science ability. And we could see that from when we heard the flute being played today and saw the gentleman playing the guitar. I think that would contribute extremely when you're doing the vetting process of who gets to go, of who's going to contribute to that environment through the arts. And we are also suffering in our schools today with the arts being taken out of it. I think the after-school programs of bringing the science of astronomy and space exploration to the after-school programs can also be integrated with the arts at the same time. So you can attract more students to those after-school programs who might think of themselves as a musician first and then eventually as an engineer.
Oh, great point, and thank you so much for bringing that out.
Okay, yeah, right.
So, do you have a?
No, I guess there was no question, or what do you think?
Yeah, what do you think? Any other comments? Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry that we went over, but it's difficult to get to Mars, and so it took a lot of us to get there. Okay, thank you.